All right, a new Nostr news.
Nostr news, first time.
First time
We're walking.
up here.
That's right.
Well, I've thought it would be fun to do this for a long time. I wanted to kind of do a walking pod, and yeah, I mean, geez, you know, San Francisco these days we got spring. What is it? Sunny, 72.
It's there's days like these you remember. Oh yeah, SF is awesome.
But I like the idea of like, okay, podcasts are in a sense a little overdone in my opinion. They're kind of like, okay, it's a host and a guest and you're kind of doing your thing. Sit down and jam through some subjects. I'm like, hey, let's go a little more freestyle. Let's do it a little more weird, you know?
Well, also it's just like, why not? I mean, if we're, you know, here in this beautiful city with nature, why not take advantage of it, you know?
Yeah.
A lot healthier, we get our step counts.
And I love walking all the time, and I love hanging out and podcasting, so why not?
Me too, man.
Why not marry them?
I love walking, I love jamming with my buddy.
Exactly.
Let's do it together.
And you got into podcasting on your own, kind of where you're the host or you're the
Well, I don't know about
instigator,
host.
let's say.
Yeah, the instigator.
You're sort of my permanent guest, but
loosely determined. Yeah. Well, no, I mean you definitely inspired me. Like obviously, you know, I'd done a couple of like quote unquote more formal podcasts. Yeah, that's right. But then, you know, we've been jamming on Nostr news and stuff. Was that good?
Yeah, I just want to make sure. I'm seeing your red. Make sure. Yeah. Okay. Let's not get hit by cars.
You know?
Okay.
Two fools walking through the park. Anyways, we've been doing this, I guess, for a little over a year now. Actually, it's been a little over a year because I remembered while you were gone in March was the 1 year anniversary of Nostr.
Oh yeah,
which is
that's
crazy.
Right. I was seeing pictures of that. I saw you jumping in that river out back.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Behind. What was it? The Relax?
Yeah, or whatever the
what was it called?
I forgot the name of
in
the place.
Uvita, right? It was.
Yeah, it was super nice. Yeah, I was hopping in the river. Actually, I remember there was a strong current. I got like slammed into a rock. I think I had like some like reasonable abrasions.
Right.
Totally worth it though. And anyways, so I've been doing this with you for about a year. Then obviously I do some other podcasts now and then, but it's super fun. And one of my goals this year that I'm getting, you know, kind of in the groove in is just to create more in general. Writing is one way to do that, obviously, but that, for me at least, takes a little bit more time.
Yeah.
I like to put a little more thought in that. Podcasting is just like a super easy way, especially if you have someone that you would have enjoyed talking with already, like with you, or with, you know, my first one I did with Stu. And, you know, I love jamming with you or Stu or people like that already. And why not just put it out into the world, see what kind of interesting feedback. So anyway, I was telling you before this, I don't have a car, so I rented it. Actually, I rented a Tesla.
Yeah.
I was telling you for the first time I ever drove a Tesla. It was fucking sick, and drove to Chico, and hung out with Stu, and we did like we recorded a podcast on a beautiful day by the river, and it was extremely fun. I got a bunch of great ideas out of it. Had a ton of fun collaborating with Stu. And yeah, I'm hooked. I want to start doing it a lot more now. Especially outdoors.
Nice, I like that. And what do you sort of have like it's just whoever you're hanging with, you're going to try to mic it up, or how do you think about what kinds of things you want to make?
Well, okay, so the first thing I was going to say, I was actually doing a walk the other day. My dad and I were in the Mission, and there's, you know, Calle 24, the 24th Street, there's like a Latino district. I was in some, like, I guess, bookstore gallery there, and there was a quote that really just stuck out to me because it's something that I found over and over again in my life. The gist of it is like the greatest joy, or one of the greatest joys in life, is co-creating with a friend. And, you know, I think back to my best friendships and my best times, like when I was in Mexico with my Bright Buddies, obviously with us in this last year doing this, you know, it's so much more fun to like do something with your friends and create. So I would say the first goal is just people that I really sort of enjoy already talking with. Focus on like, you know, building our friendships, having more fun together, creating, co-creating. That's like the number one goal. In terms of the topics, you know, obviously there's going to be a big focus on Nostr because that's what's most top of mind for me. And I'm sure Bitcoin and Lightning will come up in there a lot too. But I don't want to limit it to that. And so I told you I'm calling it tentatively Hive Mind Ideas from the Edge.
I love
that. I've got this Ideas from the Edge sort of sub or...
And that was a Stacker News territory?
Exactly, territory.
Was that the first place that showed up?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw it there and I was like, oh, this is a great name.
Thank you, Dick.
Like
I appreciate that.
it inspires me to click and learn what are the ideas from the edge? What are we talking about?
What the hell is this guy going on?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know enough about your point of view, so it's interesting to me to hear, like, what do you think is on the edge?
Well, exactly. And so that's kind of my hope, is that at least, enjoy these early days of Nostr. I do think it's going to go mainstream, but kind of like Bitcoin was in 2010, 2011, 2012 era, that's kind of where I see Nostr right now. And so anyone that was into Bitcoin then or Nostr now, I feel like it's someone that's already kind of at the edge in a lot of things. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in what else people like me and you and Stu are interested. That tends to be things like, the big question, what is this? What is reality?
Right.
What is the mind? What is consciousness? Other kinds of interesting technology, experiments.
What is your most, like, edgy idea? Like, obviously, Bitcoin, Lightning, Nostr, like, we're all, for us, that's all kind of mainstream, but I bet you have some idea you're playing with or exploring that I would think is edgy, or that I've not really acquainted myself with it yet. So what is what's like an idea from the edge that's so far on the edge? It doesn't have to be that it's, well, I don't know, like what's
an example?
An example, but not one that is familiar to us.
Okay.
One that's familiar to you.
I'll give you
Except me.
Yeah, I mean, okay, here's something that maybe is spicy for some people, maybe not. I think science, as people commonly describe it, is a religion, and I don't necessarily buy it. And what I mean by that is, there's this idea, not to say, and it depends on like maybe semantics of what you mean by science, but the scientific method of, having some results that can be repeatedly verified. But most people have this idea that requires objectivity. Like, can many people get the same results from an experiment? I personally think that's just impossible and insane. And when you stop and think about it, I think a lot of people will agree there's no such thing as objectivity. And actually, this comes very much into the Nostr lens as well. So science by objectivity, I don't think is possible, because there's nothing in life that is not subjective. You, almost like definitionally or tautologically, have never had an experience where you weren't you. And so there's always a point of view, always.
Right.
And so this gets into something that I've been very interested in for, I guess, many years, kind of like in this whole like idea with Vedanta, which is like, sort of like Hindu school of thought, that that there's kind of like two classes of things, and somewhat semantics, and people will come back and say, well, actually there's only one class of thing, it's everything. But but the way it was kind of like explained to me, really clicked some years ago, is there is the subject and the observer, there's consciousness, and there is objects of consciousness, i.e. perspective or subject, and then what the perspective or subject is viewing. And so all things, physical realm, material, mental, all thoughts, those are all observed, but there's always an observer, and there's never not been an observer. And one way of thinking about that is when you dream. You say, oh, I had this dream, and you say, well, I was there. And you're like, well, what was there? Your body wasn't there. And you say, okay, well, it was some state where I was everything. I was the substrate of reality. And then you start saying, well, what's the difference between that and reality itself? And it's a very thin line. And anyways, yeah, so I guess one of my spicier takes is there's no such thing as objectivity, which means, the only true science is something that you personally can verify for yourself.
Right. And what would, I guess, what would the haters say? Like the people who think that idea is too crazy? Because I would say, like, I don't think I've articulated what you've said, but I'm mostly there with you. Though I think there are, I don't know, I guess I think there's a lot of bad science, the science, and there's people who sort of are, gatekeepers, presumed gatekeepers of knowledge, and I'm not, I don't subscribe to that kind of stuff. But I think there's also like ideas that help us, build a better future. That are ideas that are sort of foundational to how technology works. How do electrons go through a p-n junction, or create semiconductor NAND gates and stuff.
Yeah.
So like those things to me feel a little more objective. But like, am I just at the wrong edge here, or like?
Well, I think there's like different places where people may agree or disagree, and maybe it's not as edgy as I thought, which would be good. This is why we're buddies. But but kind of like even further than that, just to say, like, to take a step back, there's literally never been there's no such thing as anything that was ever objectively observed. There's only different perspectives that have observed it. And so anything you've ever observed was you. Anything else anyone else has ever observed is them, and different mental or physical states can obviously change what people are seeing. Another way of saying this is, if I touch something, like if I touch your arm right now, like guaranteed it's the simulation. It's a simulation that I'm touching. It has to be, because even if there is, like a fraction of a second, a microsecond, that it took for the impulse when I touched your arm to go to my brain, there was still a delay, but I didn't perceive that delay. And so at that level, you could say, well, was I in quote unquote objective reality or not? Well, there's a delay. So I know what I'm experiencing was the simulation from the delay. And then you say, well, then why do I believe that the objective reality is the same as the simulated reality, but with the delay? I mean, for all I know, it could be a brain in a vat or God dreaming or whatever. And all that to say, I guess, that our experience, and that's not to say it's any less real, but our experience it's a subjective experience. And I guess another...
But are there examples, though, when enough people have a similar enough subjective experience that we kind of come to social consensus that that's kind of the reality that we're going to agree to for, launching off new things, to make progress? I think you need to be able to build on ideas, right?
This is something I think a lot about, right? Because it's kind of like, I don't know what the right answer to this question is, because, it's kind of like you say, well, Newtonian physics or whatever, like, it's useful, right? We know it's not quote unquote true from every perspective.
Right.
Like, we have not linked it with, the sort of not inconsistencies, but indeterminism in the quantum fields or whatever. But like, I mean, it's great for like building a spaceship when we're launching a rocket. Like, I'm glad we all agree on Newtonian physics. So I guess the answer is both. Like, yes, there are certain shared perspectives which are quote unquote very useful, but not always necessarily true.
Right.
And then I guess the big question is then, like, well, so what? Which I don't know. I mean, these are all ideas that I'm wrangling with. But I guess another critique of what I'm saying could be, one way you could take all of this is you could be very like solipsistic, or like you could basically literally just slip into solipsism and say, well, it's just me. It's only just me. And that's also, from a certain angle, true. Everything that you've ever seen, the dream, it is just you, including other people. And one version of that is like this solipsism, no, it's just little me, Max. Another view would be, no, it's big me, everything. Anyways, I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with all this, but these are the kinds of ideas that I'm interested in.
Ideas from the edge.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And is it like you've got number one up now, or?
Yep, number one is up with Stu. We talked.
Is that's on a YouTube or a podcast or?
No YouTube. I'm not as sophisticated yet. We'll get there. It was just a podcast, and shout out to Stu for doing the Audacity work. I think another topic that I want to discuss a lot, again, Nostr is going to feature heavily in the first couple guests I want to do, but is evolution. That's another big quote-unquote idea from the edge.
Right.
I think our current understanding of evolution is good but not complete, and there's a lot to explore there.
And so, when you say it's good but not complete, what kind, are there areas that you suspect are missing? Or?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like,
I mean, look, this is something I want to explore for many, many episodes. But like, I think this idea that everything is just random mutations and the natural selection plays out does not. My intuition is that's wrong.
You think it's not random? It's more directed.
Correct. And I don't know exactly how that all works, but that's like an idea I want to explore. I think there may be some randomness, but I don't really believe in randomness necessarily.
Is that sort of guide? I guess, like, what makes you think that that randomness is not the best explanation?
Well, I think I have a strong intuition that there's some kind of desire or will that is driving a lot of things. And we may not understand. I mean, what we certainly understand from our own perspective. In fact, I forgot who it was, but there's one of these guys at the University of Arizona who does like consciousness studies or whatever. I think Brian Romley was retweeting him, and he kind of had this similar criticism where he thinks that sort of like the Darwin like gene selection is not necessarily correct, but that there is some kind of volition or will of individual organisms that have basically feelings. And it kind of comes down to like, I guess like the Freudian pleasure principle, like things want to move towards pleasure away from pain.
Uh-huh.
I don't know all the gist of his argument, but that's one thing. In the book that Kevin Kelly actually wrote, Out of Control, which, God, it's like 30 years old now. He talks a lot about evolution in there and has a similar kind of idea that we only have a partial picture today, and there's some kind of volition or will perhaps at each level of complexity. Because, this is something Stu and I talked a lot about, this sort of holon theory that everything is part, whole,
Yep.
part, whole, and that perhaps at each level, as we are, as like at the human organism, we certainly have our own desires, intuitions, volitions, will.
Yep.
What if, at the particle, I'm not saying this is correct, but it's an idea from the edge,
Yeah.
so humor me.
Yeah.
What if a particle has volition or will, and if it's going to go this way or that way?
Right.
I don't know. Certainly nothing I can prove, but
I'm
things I think
interested
about.
in that idea in the sort of also the opposite scope, which is the particle scope, maybe one area to explore, but also like, I mean, it's your own brand even, Hive Mind, but like the
superorganism.
The superorganism of
Totally.
humans. We don't really have, like, we kind of have the internet, and we have publishing on the internet that kind of touches on that, and certainly Nostr is like a new approach to that idea, but also just like, I think Bitcoin is an alignment mechanism for the human organism.
Yep.
But like, what else is out there
Totally.
that's underexplored when you get more people wanting to contribute to work together? I guess open source,
Yep.
more broadly than just Bitcoin, is also kind of an example of that. But the more that stuff's digital,
Yep.
and the more that it's kind of like, like costless to copy and share and create and collaborate together, it seems like that's like a huge movement that obviously open source has been around for decades, but I think it's never been stronger or more important than it is today, and
Yeah.
I see that continuing to increase the next decade.
I couldn't agree more. And in fact, I would say this is probably the number one idea that I would like to explore on Ideas from the Edge, is this idea that perhaps Nostr is the substrate in which the hive mind is going to form, and that open source software up until this point has been great in the sense that you can now take code and then copy and fork it. But now, and Stu I think made this point very eloquently in our podcast, like and this is one of the big ideas I took away from him, is that Nostr now gives you the opportunity. It's basically a substrate for a new form of evolution to take place in, because you can now fork and experiment not only with the code, which open source allows for, but with the data
Yep.
and associated traits, for example, reputation or identity that comes with that.
Yep.
An example that he used, is just kind of a fun app he wants to potentially build as one of his proof of concepts for what he's working on the satellite, is like, imagine, you remember the site Couchsurfing?
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Very cool.
It's like a precursor to Airbnb.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
frankly, it was much cooler than Airbnb in a lot of ways. Like, it's
Yeah.
different, but it was like the hippie version, right? Like, you got to, like, my buddy Pablo that I make music with in Mexico, he used to host people all the time. And you just meet so many random cool people, and then you stay with them, and you kind of build this like almost social capital where, you host people,
Yep.
you get good reviews, that goodwill kind of pays itself forward when you go on the road.
Yeah.
And anyways, it's for adventurers, for travelers.
Yeah.
And anyways, the site got bought by some private equity firm or something. They tried to squeeze the money out of it. As Stu said, I didn't follow the demise, but they tried to charge people like $60 a year, and everyone on that site's broke. So like, of course it wasn't gonna work. And it's like such a tragedy that it's like gone.
Yeah.
And what about all of the reputation, the social connections that were built up there? That's a loss for humanity.
Yeah.
And if that had persisted,
Yep.
and you could fork it,
Somebody new could build
Exactly.
on that existing data set.
we all stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
But when we kill the identity and the data, open source software is great, but it's just one little piece of them.
Yep. And it seems open source also is, sometimes marketing language.
Yeah.
But without the basis of like, everything's available and you can build it and run it yourself and you can customize it your own way. But if there's a holdback, like if there's a holdback on the data,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not very useful to be open source. Meaning, you can claim open source without actually kind of offering the actual principles that people typically would care about.
Totally.
And I think we're seeing that in AI with some of the like, oh, it's open source AI.
But no
the
weights.
models, the weights.
And I would argue, I'm curious how you would, if you would agree with this or not, that, you know, it really hasn't been easy to open source beyond just the code, because we haven't had it like a common standard for the identity and data yet, which is what I see Nostr as.
Yeah.
So, you know, if everyone's open sourcing, but they have different standards for how they're doing identity and like how the graph is being built, and it doesn't like click together very well.
Yep.
So, anyways, that's what's been on my mind.
Nice.
How about you, DK? You've been traveling out and about for 2 months. You've probably been following AI stuff more than I have. Like, what's been on your mind? What have you been up to?
What have I been doing? Yeah, we were traveling a bunch, and I hope this wind is not totally destroying the audio.
We're doing it live, guys. It's
doing
real.
It live, yeah.
We're out here in reality.
We got wind hitting us.
Base reality, maybe.
Base reality.
Maybe not.
Best we can tell. Yeah, we've been traveling around a lot and just, you know, meeting a bunch of people, entrepreneurs, people building new things. And yeah, I mean, certainly AI is, I feel like it's just like dominating every conversation with anybody building something in technology. And I think it's like, it's, you know, it's good in that it's a new ingredient that we can play with, lets us build new things that were never possible before. But there's, I mean, I think there's a lot of like repetition of core ideas and a little bit, the stuff I like is when somebody goes radically different.
Totally.
And I feel like a lot of the volume of stuff is more like, okay, another foundation model. Okay, you know, it's like another chat service or something, which is fine. Like, I think that's just the way innovation works. But the stuff that I get excited about is when people have beliefs contrary to the mainstream.
Yep.
And I think one of those beliefs that I see in tiny little pockets today is people say, peace, you know, AI research lab, big models, huge investment, lots of GPUs, peace, you got that. We're going to take and do something very different with it that's going to empower people to create in a new way. And, you know, a couple examples are like, you know, you can use like you know, ChatGPT or something to do anything, you know, chat and get anything. But if you want to write fiction, ChatGPT is like okay to give you like a stub of something, but if you want to like collect ideas and launch off from those points to other things and collect up a bunch of different potential scenarios and almost like roadmap out an actual story that would be interesting to another human to read, you know, ChatGPT doesn't really get you there. So like there's a group that's building a tool that's really going deep on helping fiction writers. It's not a new AI, it's not a new model, new weights. It's not really like from the research realm. It's more from like the product and UX realm. And I feel like there's tiny pockets of these, like very rare that people are actually working on that. But to me, that's the stuff that I get super excited about. I'm like, you can actually do something with this. And it gives you superpowers, not just information retrieval superpowers, which is fine. You know, I think it's fine to explore the space. But like the stuff I get excited about is the stuff that's like net new experiences that are totally uncontrolled. Like, you know, will an app into existence by describing it, right? It's kind of, you know, there's a few of those coming up in pockets. And how does storytelling work? You know, from where the end product is written fiction work. And then how does storytelling work where the end product is a 30-second or a 3-minute video that tells a story. And it's different than like the AI research lab. They focus a lot on, you know, the research side of it. And they have very impressive demos, but it's almost like I fall in love with the products, you know, that really help people do something not just a great demo. And I don't mean to belittle the research. I think it's great that people are working on it. But the stuff I get excited about is like, okay, take all the well-understood research, you know, trust that smart people are gonna push it forward and figure that out. But like, what can you do with it kind of end to end to get an idea in your head out into the world. And I'd say there's like a bunch of those that I'm spending a lot more time with these days. So that's one. And I think I would, maybe I always bias this way, but I think even, like, I think one of my, you know, I love Nostr and use it every day, but I also feel like a lot of it is the infrastructure for how to do wallets or how to consume a feed or how to do relays, which I think is like totally required to get somewhere else.
But you're interested in experiences.
But I'm like, like a bunch of friends and I have been talking like, why isn't there just like a little, like some sort of group chat sports betting app?
Yep.
That like you can kind of, you know, it settles up all the payments and you can sort of make a bunch of claims. It doesn't have to be totally crazy decentralized. Like it can be, you know, non-custodial wallets where you all control it and there's no corporation that controls it, but all the like stuff could be like, you know, coordinated through relays and you know, really something that's like you couldn't do without Nostr. Like you wouldn't want to do it on like I mean, you could stitch it together before Nostr, but with Nostr you could make like A+ experience.
Totally. Well, let's talk about that a second. I do want to come back on the AI thing, but the Nostr experience has been very top of mind for me. So I think I've had somewhat of a breakthrough in understanding.
I want to hear this, yeah.
And you know, it's not like that novel, like something I've been thinking about and others have been thinking about for a long time, for over a year, for sure, 2 years maybe, whatever. But it really just kind of clicked for me. So for the longest time, you know, my thesis, I would say our thesis on Nostr has very much been, look, like unlike some of these other things that are just trying to build social media or whatever, like Nostr is just a generalizable protocol for identity and data. And because of that, you can really build anything with it. And so any network effects that happen, they accrue at the protocol level, not at the application level.
Yep.
Great. So one of the big questions in my mind has been, okay, cool. The first that they took off was Twitter clones. Great. You know, churned a couple 100,000 users, got 25,000 or so that are very technical sticking around. Excellent.
Yep.
What's going to be the next big pop? And so marketplaces are what I've been looking for. You know, I thought maybe it'll be local Bitcoins, maybe it'll be something with open AI agents like what Christopher David is doing. And I think all that stuff's coming too. But I think we have a candidate for the next pop right now.
What's that?
Well, I think it's actually what Bob's working on.
Oh, yeah.
And now the Mutiny guys as well. So what, have you seen his new site, bitcoinmints.com?
No.
Check it out, bitcoinmints.com. And then Mutiny launched something very similar feature in their new release today. And so the gist of it is, so how deep are you on eCash and all that stuff, like the mints?
I've played around with like, you know, Cashew and Fetty and yeah, I'm like, I'd say, you know, conversant, but not an expert.
Yeah, and to be clear, I mean, I'm not a super expert either, but I think they're very fascinating. Most people listening to this probably have a pretty good idea. High level, they work in different ways, but a mint is basically, you can just think of it as like a bank essentially, although I know some people will totally disagree with that verbiage, but to simplify things, someone takes in some asset, in this case Bitcoin, and they issue a token, or I don't mean token in like the scam crypto sense, they issue whatever, an IOU for whatever that asset is. And you know, originally David Chaum came up with this idea. He was trying to do this for dollars, but now, you know, another big thing that's really clicking for me is I think obviously the internet native things are going to take off before trying to interface with the old world.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like in the John Perry Barlow, like leave the beast of steel and governments and all that crap behind, like let us go into the realm of the mind, the new sphere, the internet.
Yeah.
That's where this is going to really pop.
Yeah.
And so because we have Bitcoin already in the new sphere and already in the internet, it makes total sense that, you know, if we're going to have mints, which is one way to have scaling, particularly because they're interoperable with Lightning, so you can have a Bitcoin Lightning payment that goes to a mint that pays an invoice, you know, with a token or vice versa, or IOU. You know, it makes total sense that these mints for Bitcoin would be the thing to pop, and that's what's happening. Now, full disclaimer, I haven't really used this yet. I think for very small amounts it makes sense. Like the challenge with the mint, of course, is that all the trust assumptions you have for a custodian or a bank are right there, right? And so for me personally, like if I want to trust someone, I either want like completely non-custodial, or I want trusted like a regulated public company like Block. However, there are a lot of use cases where that doesn't make sense. And for a lot of users around the world for whom, Block is not an option because they're in Nigeria or Mexico or wherever. And so the beauty of, in the case of cashew mints is any individual or entity can create a mint. In the case of feta mint, a group of individuals or entities can create a mint. And the problem there then is trust. How do you find these guys? Discoverability. And who do you trust?
Right.
I really wish there were a way, a network that was open for discoverability and that had some kind of built-in reputation identity system. That sure would be great, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't that be great? Yeah. If only.
And so, so I think kudos to Bob. I think he saw this first, or was, he had a very clear vision for it. So basically, it's popping off right now. Bitcoin mints, where people, it started with cashew mints. They just added feta mints. People can you can basically publish to Nostr, hey, we have a mint. People can discover your mint, and here's the beauty. You can say, I only want to see mints from first degree connections or people I trust. And that's what Mutiny now has the same discoverability. So today I was kind of messing with it. I couldn't get it to work. I'm sure I need to play with it a bit more.
Yeah.
But like the gist of it was like, okay, what mint should I use? Oh, well, this is the one that Tony recommends. Okay, especially for small amounts, I totally trust Tony, so I'll just use whatever he says. Why wouldn't I?
Yep.
And anyways, and so, and this gets into web of trust, which I want to talk more about. But I think the concrete takeaway here is we now have a problem which requires discoverability and trust, for which Nostr is currently being used to solve that problem in real time and starting to take off. But then the beauty of that is you say, well, what are the second order effects of this? And this is, another note that Bob put out, which was a great point. He's like, if someone goes and they leave a review and write like a rating and a really good review for a mint, and it's super high quality, what are people going to do? Well, they're going to follow that person. Well, now that person has new followers on the social clients. Oh, and by the way, that reputation, i.e. social capital, that they've accrued, that they've accrued can now be used for any other kind of marketplace or rating site.
I see.
Similarly, I think Artur was one of the first people to ship this on Nostr.ban with his app selector. You can see what your friends are using. And that's a great use case as well. And I think those are going to kind of spiral together. But this mint thing, I think, is the first domino. And it's because this is the perfect solution to discover and figure out which mints to trust.
Right. Yeah. And now on the mints, my understanding is one of the biggest challenges with mints is the eCache that Mint uses very good at privacy, but then that means that the Mint Guardian is kind of on the hook.
That's right.
And I think we don't know how that should be handled regulatorily. So is that still an open issue in your mind, or does Bob have a view on how?
Absolutely. Bob has views on this, so I'm not going to speak for him, and I think he's gone deeper with lawyers and whatnot. I also think it's very different in how cashew and feta mint do it. And so I'm not an expert on this, and Bob and Callie and Tony and Obi and people like that can speak much better to this. But the gist of it is, again, for someone like you or me, would I recommend we put money into the random mint? Probably not. If you're going to use a custodial service like Cash App's probably great. But there's 6+ billion people for whom that's not an option.
Right.
And I think, and oh, by the way, the other thing that I'm so bullish on with Nostr and all this interoperability is, your question about the hive mind. It's not just humans. AIs can use mints. Who's going to regulate that? I mean, it's an AI,
Right.
Anyways.
But somebody has to operate the mint.
Yes.
And I guess that whoever's operating the mint, probably, there's kind of question how do they have to KYC all of their users?
Completely unsolved. There's going to be big rugs. There's going to be people that, risk jail, all the things, and yet it's still going to work because it's open, it's online. Some will be probably regulated, some will probably not. Some may say, hey, if you have a US IP address, you can't use it.
Right.
The other thing I heard on MVK's last podcast, I don't fully understand how this works. I think Callie got working recently, the ability to do a lightning payment across multiple mints. You can have multiple mints contribute and do one lightning payment. So, I mean, the example he gave is imagine you had just a ton of mints with like 50 cents.
Yeah.
I mean, no one's coming after the 50-cent mint. But then you aggregate, whatever, 1,000 of those together. Okay, you got a payment.
Well, there's also the trust issue. Like maybe you've decided to trust a certain mint.
Exactly.
And maybe you've decided to trust 6 mints. Maybe I have only chosen to trust 2 of the mints, 2 of the 6.
Yeah.
But I have another 8 that I trust.
Totally.
And so I won't accept eCash from, the mints that you have that I don't trust, but you can presumably send me a payment either to a mint that we both trust, or you can take value from one that you do trust, but in a sense like convert it to Lightning payment.
Exactly.
To send to a mint that I trust.
So you might actually want to receive actual Bitcoin. You made the channel capacity to do that, and then maybe they send an eCash payment. Like again, like this is all super early days, but the interesting tidbit to me is that it's taking off, and people are setting up mints permissionlessly. They're rating them naturally.
Yeah.
This thing has legs.
Yeah. And I think like people always talk about trust minimization, right? Everybody in the cypherpunk movement is about trust minimization. And I think that's, generally a good idea to look for.
Right.
But also it probably applies differently at different scales, right? Like
totally.
Maybe you can trust, your brother or sister or parents, Maybe not
Maybe
for
not,
some people,
sure.
but
for different
but
people,
you can sort of decide who you trust. But it's like much more like the wider the scope of the like guardian or authority, I'd say, in general, the more likely they are to rug you, right? Like, whoever, Sam Bankman-Fried has no direct relationship with you, right?
Right.
No problem, he'll rug you. He doesn't care at all, right? Whereas like, I don't know, if I was holding some Bitcoin for you, or you're holding some Bitcoin for me, we're probably
fine.
Not going to rug each other.
Yeah.
So I think there's kind of like the scope of how big these things are and how much a given operator, and sort of what the use cases are for it.
Well, and again, I mean, two caveats here. One caveat and one takeaway. Caveat, I'm not really using these myself, and for my day-to-day use cases, I don't see it yet. But again, for 6+ billion people, they're not going to be able to do on-chain and open a channel, or whatever. Like for everyone, it may or may not work depending on their circumstances.
Right.
But the second thing is your point on trust, and this is where this is my big takeaway. This is the first major domino, or second, if you look at the Twitter explosion a year ago, for what makes Nostr go mainstream. Because now there is some subset of users, maybe many international, maybe in regimes that are not favorable to their freedom or whatever, where like they need to use this technology,
right?
And they will, and that's going to bootstrap a whole new use case for the Nostr network. And now, it's dozens right now that are creating and leaving reviews for these mints in like the first week or two.
Yep.
Soon that'll be hundreds, thousands, probably. Once you get to that point, now each of those users has this new social capital which they can take with them to the Twitter clones and whatever the next thing is. And so imagine you're, someone that left an excellent review on a mint, and now, Christopher David integrates Nostr identities for his open agents thing, and you say, actually, I want to leave a review for this agent that can do whatever, like you're saying, like spin up stories for me. And because I have this social capital that I accrued from this other app, but I keep it with my client-side identity, boom, it bootstraps users and reputation for that next one.
Right.
And I think it's just going to start knocking the dominoes down.
And so is Bob's site like a hub where you go to begin your mint journey? Like you create a mint there, or you discover other mints, or?
I think they may have creation tools, I don't know, but from what I saw, you primarily just, as someone looking for a mint, you discover and then leave reviews. And in the Mutiny wallet too now, I mean, Bob's site was just the first runner, but Mutiny is, again, I didn't get this working because I was just playing on the right for the show, but it was very simple. It was like, hey, find a Feta mint. Here's a list. This one's recommended by Tony. This one's recommended by whoever. Boom, I chose the Tony.
And that, by recommended, he
vouched for it.
He wrote a thing about it, or there's some sort of a reaction kind where you vouch? Or?
On Bob's, I think they asked for reviews. On this one, I don't know how they got that. maybe, I don't know if it was explicit or implicit. Explicit being he left a review, implicit being he's using it.
He's using it, okay.
But one of the two.
And these are all cashews, or these are?
No. So cashew was the first one that Bob launched with.
Okay.
And then they just added Fediment. I think Tony and them started with Fediment, and I think they've added cashew. I'm not sure if they've added.
And Tony is the Mutiny team, right?
Oh yeah, Tony's the CEO of Mutiny.
Is Tony and Mutiny doing a different thing than what Bob is doing?
No, but they're all interoperable.
They're all
working together.
interoperable. Okay.
Yeah, again, the beauty.
But is Tony's thing is mostly a wallet?
Yeah.
And Bob's thing is mostly a review hub or something?
For now. And
okay.
Tony's thing, Mutiny, they just launched their update. Holy shit, this is so beautiful.
Okay.
Wow, we should show this.
There you go.
Pacific.
These are ideas from the edge of the continent.
There you go, baby. The end of the world. SF may have its problems. The same one. Wow.
Gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
What a day.
Fuck. So, okay, we have so much to catch up on. I forgot we haven't talked in 2 months. So, the other huge thing that popped even before the Mint reviews is both in Mutiny and Primal. And what both of them have done, and Mutiny just kind of like made it more clear that that's what it is today, is they've essentially built social Venmo. So they're both of them have a wallet experience. Obviously, Primal's custodial, Mutiny's not, where you can pay anyone on Nostr. You literally just search for someone's name, and if it's on Nostr, you can pay them. Now that is huge already.
And how does that work? Because if that person doesn't have a wallet connected, where does it go?
Assuming they've hooked up.
Oh, if they have a wallet, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of assumptions baked in there. But, while you were gone, I took a trip. I met up with some LPs and other folks in South America. And I saw everyone's jaw drop when I showed them the Primal wallet. Not the social media feed. In fact, I actually think Primal's much more powerful right now as a wallet. Same with Mutiny. And I was like, look guys, this looks like Venmo. Everyone's like, yeah? I'm like, cool. Who here's on Nostr? Boom. Payment. Boom. Payment. I'm like, think about this. This is already, for both of these guys, and of course Mutiny uses the Fediment stuff as a way to not be custodial, but for both of these guys, for both of these wallets, in my opinion, a 10x better experience already than Cash App, Venmo, Nubank, any of these global neobanks or payment services, because it's international. If I go down to Brazil and I say, hey Lucas from Lightning Labs, I want to send you a payment, download Cash App or Venmo, you can't. You just can't. If he comes up and says, hey Max, I want to send you a payment, download Nubank, I can't. Both of us can download Primal, which automatically comes with a wallet, and send a payment instantly. Huge.
And can people, I think the early adopter group on Nostr is probably mostly comfortable with like a 12-word seed and kind of own your keys. And is there a way for a user who's maybe not sort of looking for something
Primal
more similar to the the Venmo experience, let's say, if they just sign up with Primal, what do they have to do to kind of get started?
So I would say the Mutiny experience is, by trying to be non-custodial, is obviously going to be trickier. For a lot of early adopting Bitcoin people, it's the preference for obvious reasons. But I would say for a complete noob, Primal is 100% what I'd recommend. I forget.
And do you attach your mobile number? Because that's kind of not super cypherpunk, right?
Cypherpunk enough for Signal, but I guess they finally changed that. I haven't gone through, I guess, the onboarding flow in a while, but if I recall, I think you download the app. I forget what you attach to, but I think they just spin you up a wallet automatically, and so you don't even I think they save some kind of seed phrase for you in the iCloud, maybe, or maybe that's where they save the private key. Million, if you're listening to this, maybe you can correct us and explain how it's done. But as I recall, it's pretty much click, install, get up and going. So without a doubt, Primal is like the easiest way for a noob.
And how do you search for people on that? Like they have to have, does it use a a third-party search service, or did Primal build their own search service?
They built their own. So as an example, here's the wallet. You can see I've got a few sats in there. I can now send, and as an example, if I want to send to DK, primal.net, boom, I just found you on there, just search DK.
Oh, nice.
Boom, sent you a payment. Done. Instantly.
Wow,
Instantly,
awesome.
baby. That experience, that is crazy. I just found you on Nostr with their search, sent you a payment within a second, done.
Yep.
Like for all the newbies and by the way, even here in SF, I went to a couple of like mainstream tech events or whatever.
Yeah.
And I showed this to everyone. They're like, oh, well, Bitcoin, it's slow. I'm like, Lightning means it's instant. I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah, and we have like Nostr search built in so I can find anywhere on Nostr. What's that? I showed them all that experience. Everyone, people I showed in South America, the people I showed here, jaws dropped.
Yep.
People have no idea how, it's already here. It's not even theoretical.
Right. So I mean that sounds like an amazing experience. Yeah. I wonder what are the extra, sometimes there's like an extra little bit of
friction,
connection or polish or microsite that would help explain all the pieces. So does the Primal website right now explain, go on Nostr, create an account, or come on Primal and we'll create the account for you, and here's how you can be searched for, discovered, because you need, like the one you showed me, it had, I think, DK at primal.net, right? So it's like a NIP5.
Yeah.
Has Primal done the end-to-end explanation of wallet, Nostr, key, identity, or
it's a great
is that
question.
Still TBD by somebody, or?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I think they set it all for you, like without you having to do anything. But I don't know, like there's probably, I would guess, a missing gap. Motorcycle. A million or someone else, if you're listening or if you're building that missing connective tissue, it might just be as simple as like to get started, like a YouTube video or something.
Yeah.
And then maybe eventually in-app it like kind of prompts you and explains. I think there's probably still work to be done there, but yeah, I mean, I guess I've had it downloaded for a while, so I don't know.
Yeah, I set mine up a while back, and I don't know what the kind of, it's come a long way.
Yeah. Since
kind of we were first messing around with it, so I'm curious, sort of, I'm always thinking, how do you make it easier? How do you explain, to the simplest new user who they've not fully bought into every idea in the ecosystem. They, sort of poco a poco, right?
Yeah. As some of the more toxic shows say, I say this largely in jest, explain like I have .eth in my name, I'm kidding. I'm sorry, guys, I'm sorry.
That's the new ELI5.
Exactly.
ELIDE. That's funny.
So yeah. So anyways, those are the big things that have really been clicking for me.
Nice.
Oh, okay, so that actually reminds me of the other question I wanted to get your thoughts on. So, one thing that I've been really getting fascinated with is this idea of the web of trust, which came from the whole, PGP, Zimmerman idea with keys, vouching for other keys. I found a new guy who I actually want to do one of my next ideas for the edges with, who is working on some version of this. So I don't understand it well enough to do a great explanation. His system for this basically comes down to explicit trust via lists. And so his argument is that any graph, I guess, is like two lists, nodes and edges. And so, he basically thinks that you can build this web of trust by people explicitly making lists of these are the individuals I trust. Or for this topic, for movie recommendations or for food or whatever. And I think that's cool, and I think it certainly has a lot of potential. I played with Jeff's lister.lol yesterday.
Yeah.
It's come a long way. It's nice.
Last I played was a long time ago, six months or something. What's it been doing?
It just works. It's like really nice.
Oh, good.
Like I found one guy, so like people with good insights, and like three of them I immediately saw. I was like, yeah, these are three of the smartest people I found on Nostr. I don't know this fourth one. Instant follow.
Nice.
That was a really nice concrete use case.
Yep.
I think Million was tweeting about it. Noting about it. He wants to integrate. I don't know if he'll use the exact same interface or build his own, but similar list. He was complimenting Lister. So anyway, so that's like one view of how web trust will arise is this like explicit I make lists. That's cool, but my guess is that's like too much work. The other way I think it can happen is just implicit, which is who follows who zaps who, the zappering stuff that we've been talking about for over a year. My intuition is it's going to arise more from a use case like the mints, and then agents. But obviously people are working on the explicit case. What is your view on how Web of Trust rises?
Yeah,
and what it looks like?
Yeah, I think it's the kind of thing, I think we were chatting about this a few weeks ago, and I think it's the kind of thing where you don't necessarily make progress on it just by, kind of wrenching away at it, but it's, there you go, the Pacific Ocean. I think there's a bunch of great kind of attempts or approaches to it, but I haven't really seen something that kind of galvanizes that trust in a new way. And to me, that's kind of what it feels like it would look like. Like something happens where you see it and you're just like, oh, okay, it all clicks now. I feel like we're in sort of that early era when people are trying to do, hash cache and digicache and all these things. Is kind of like these all look kind of right, like it sort of should work, but then you're like, it's missing something.
It's missing something, yeah.
And the Web of Trust stuff, maybe it's just more of the same for a long time and you have it, but I kind of think there's some new thing that needs to happen that helps us all see it in a different way.
And as an example, would the Mint example that I just gave, would that qualify potentially?
Yeah, for sure. But like, what is the use case? Because like I've played with them as a, I've played with them kind of for fun and to just understand it, but I don't use any mints in my day-to-day life. And I could imagine that at some point I would, and I'm a believer that there's, substantial advantages you get from this kind of class of technologies. You want to head up towards the trees here?
Yeah.
But if I'm not using it on a day-to-day basis, I bet there's, like, if it's going to come into the world, it's not going to be because of our interest in it being cool, but it's got to serve some hair on fire problem for people.
Yeah.
And I don't know who's going to be the early adopter where they're like, I need this, I'm using it every day. I believe they're out there, but I almost feel like it's a bit of a
solution looking for a problem.
Well, I wouldn't, that feels dismissive. I wouldn't quite say it that way. I think it's more like it hasn't found the right kind of customer yet.
Yeah.
But it's not that I believe that customer's out there, but I don't know who they are. And I don't know that there's enough effort that goes into figuring out who that is,
Well, again, I'm not an expert, so eventually we should have Bob on here, maybe get Callie or Obi or something as well. But, it definitely seems to me like there's like a wave swelling there. It's early wave, but like in the last couple of weeks now, in the last couple of days on the site, like there's a lot of activity.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's just hobbyists and like fine, like, maybe that wave will reach a local maximum and pause. But if I were to guess, right, like who could the potential users be? Well, if for some reason you don't have a custodial lightning option that you can use, and you are doing low enough volume transactions that opening, and paying for your own channel, like, I don't know what that would be on Mutiny now, but like at least several dollars, maybe more than $10, depending on fee environments. So like 2 classes or 3 classes of users I can imagine. One would be people in emerging markets that for some reason need non-custodial.
Right.
Another might be potentially like, or maybe this actually be 1 class of users, but like agents that are spun up experimentally because you don't know if it's going to work or not yet. So, for example, maybe you have an AI agent that needs to make some small payments, and they need to be able to pay whatever, like, I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but MVK's Unleashed Chat, I think he's charging on the order of like 1 to 3 cents or whatever it is, 100 sats or something per question that you ask. And so if you want to just try that and you say, cool, I need to be able to make a small payment, or my agent needs to be able to make a small payment on my behalf, and string a bunch of those things together, perhaps the tokens are the easiest way for them to get up and running quickly. And, particularly in the agent case, that's powerful because, they may not have the option, well, they certainly don't have the option of like KYCing themselves. They're a
Right.
robot
Yeah.
or computer, and maybe for whatever reason you don't want to give them, or you don't have API keys to Cash App or something. And so this is the easiest way to say, I just like want to spend $5 with my agent doing all these little experiments, and that's how they get up and running.
Right. Yeah, I guess every agent, at least today, we don't really have like sovereign computers that, kind of are self-sovereign individuals.
Not yet.
and I don't know what it'll take to get there, but like every agent is owned by somebody or some person or corporation, right?
For now.
Today, yeah. So like, what does that transition look like? How do we decouple? Because I think the idea of making these payments, computer to computer, AI agents, et cetera, I think they're cool that we can do that, but I think the use case of like machines that kind of run their own account requires one major leap, which is how do we get the messy humans separated from the machine ownership? I'm not sure.
That's
Like, what does that future even look like? I just don't even know.
Well, I mean, one thing, I don't have the answer to like what's going to make it pop or how exactly it looks, but one small comment. I saw one of these like AI Twittery accounts, made this comment a couple weeks back with like, man, I need to figure out how to spin up an LLC for my agent so that it can get its own bank account to do payments. And I was like, bro, is this a joke? Like, you really think it's going to use an ACH payment system that's going to have whatever, a month plus potential for, like, come on.
Yeah.
No, like, as I've joked, JP Morgan is not banking the AI. So my guess is somehow you'll have these like autonomous, maybe not even agents, but maybe like swarms of agents, I don't know.
Yeah.
That Drew had a really interesting idea, Drew Bansel, where he basically said the limit, so if you think about this kind of like the holon theory, parts becoming whole, just like in the same way that we have molecules and those add up to organs and organ systems and so on and so forth, there's always some kind of like semi-permeable membrane or barrier between what is one organism and then the system of which it's part.
Yeah.
And his sort of hypothesis a little over a year ago was that each of these agents, where you're going to draw that sort of membrane distinction, is going to be with holding a Bitcoin key. And the reason for that is, as we talked about, if Bitcoin is digital ATP or the energy-backed currency, then for metabolism to happen, you're basically having like whatever's able to hold an energetic bank account.
Yeah.
That's the barrier between one thing and the other. And I think that's right, but I think it's going to be a Nostr pub key, just because I think that's much more generalizable, and that can have obviously lots of sub Bitcoin keys. How does that actually come to fruition? I don't know.
But so back though on the like, the cashew and Fetty and the mint stuff, and kind of Bob and Tony's mint stuff. Do you think there are categories of people who this could be, in a sense, marketed to or explained to? Because I suspect there's a lot of us who think this is really interesting technology, and we like to play with it, and we can see that it's probably useful in like a billion different ways. But I guess maybe it's a question or a hypothesis, but like, are we missing the marketing and the story?
Almost certainly.
For who will get the most value out of this today?
Almost certainly.
And because I think the use case, my guess is the use case of people who get the most value out of like an eCash is probably people who may not really see Bitcoin as a store of value and they just want some sort of payment mechanism.
100%.
Maybe they're interacting with people who come from all over the world and they can't interact well.
Yeah, I don't know, like the marketing. I mean, I think it's so early. We haven't seen, the best product so far, it's super early, right? But the best product so far is probably Mutiny, where you say, I download this wallet. And because they only do non-custodial, I guess it'd be marketed to people that, for whatever reason, they can get the value of that. And I guess your options are, open a channel, which is expensive, or select a MET.
Or?
Select a MET.
But it's I guess I'd put forth the hypothesis that it's probably the most interested parties for this may not yet
exist.
see Bitcoin as a store of value.
Super fair.
Right? They're just like, I need to get this payment thing done and transact with. I meet 100 people every day who want to pay me,
Yep.
and they never can. So I need this. So something like that.
They want dollar denominated value or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you have any hypothesis on who that group could be?
Well, I mean, my mind goes to people who interact with people who don't live near them frequently. So I mean, we just walked by the Golden Gate Bridge. If there was a busker out there, playing music and collecting money, people from all over the world come visit the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right.
And probably, many of them, once they get to the bridge, they have the currency to pay him, but maybe there's things that are less prominent, but that have, a need to transact. Like when I was in, we can go this way. When I was in India last year, we had a lot of problems paying. They have a very standard UPI.
UPI,
right?
yeah.
And they have a very standard payment system everywhere, but as a non-national, we can't use it. So anybody I wanted to pay, I kind of had to use, cash or Visa or whatever. But I wonder if there's somebody, busking on the street somewhere who would be able to get value, because there's hundreds of people come by each day who would want to transact and pay, but who can't so easily.
I mean, my intuition for that then would be, it's probably a very good example, the busking or the international payments, but my sense is that it'll probably be online economy first. So one example of online busking would be the whole value for value thing. So like artists or podcasters, maybe it's us in a weird way, right? Like, like, hey, we're out here busking for our podcast.
That's right.
I just feel like probably online pops first, but.
Yeah, I think that sounds right to me. Generally, the online stuff, it's just like newer, it's fresher, it's easier to distribute and see experiences globally when something interesting happens. But yeah, it feels like kind of early days on a lot of that stuff. I guess one of the things that, I don't know if you consider this an idea enough from the edge, but it's certainly, I'm sort of, I'd say I don't have a strong view on this stuff, but like, I've been wondering why I've not been more interested in the ordinals and inscription stuff. Like, I hung out with Danny, what was that, 6-9 months ago, and and every time we hang out at their place, I would like to hear the update on what's going on, but like it kind of hasn't really, like it hadn't really grabbed me, and then the thing that grabbed me, I think he was on Stacker News doing an AMA. And I was asking him about, could this be used for something like a DNS system?
The namespace.
The namespace?
Yeah, that was a great idea.
Which I think is like, I think, and I just said DNS. I think DNS is like the less interesting one, but just the namespace. Like you just looked me up and you found me via dk@primal.net, but like, I think we're already probably connected in some, like I follow you, you follow me, so probably it's easy to find me, but like, imagine you want to find somebody you didn't have any connection to, could they just give you a token that is their name, right? But that doesn't have an issue, or not a name that Primal runs or Damus runs or somebody else runs, but just like a globally unique namespace. And it seems like inscriptions have that kind of potential, and I don't understand all the limitations. I think it has to be 11 or 12 characters or something. I don't know, but
I'm not sure actually.
But that kind of stuff, to me, that feels a little bit like an idea from the edge.
100%.
That, like, I'm not super comfortable with it. I'm not sure if I don't know that I hate it the way some people do, but I'm not drawn to it yet. And now I'm kind of asking myself, maybe there's something really interesting there that I'm just kind of not super drawn to. Like, I'm curious enough about it to be like, okay, what's this all about? But it's not like, I don't obsess about like, oh wow, what else could you do,
Totally. I mean, high level, look, I'm not anti-ordinals or inscriptions. I'm also not that into it. Just for whatever reason, I've never been like a big collector. I get people to pay for it. Inscriptions, I think it's cool, and I'm certainly not one of the people that's like ban or anything like that. I'm like, no, like, free markets. People want to do it. Knock yourself out. I mean, I have friends that have put obscene amounts of money into Magic the Gathering cards.
Yeah.
Would I? No. Do I like begrudge them? No.
Yeah.
It's just not my thing. So similarly, however, I also talked to Danny about this about a year ago. You know, the original idea that he was describing is that every ordinal has a name.
Yeah.
And so you could literally sell someone like the DK ordinal or the max ordinal. I forget, maybe it's a minimum of 3 characters. I don't remember. But the problem with that, as I recall, is that if you wanted, so I guess there's 2 different classes of namespace here, and I'm curious, you may have other ones. One is the ordinal itself, which is named, which is, you know, itself a UTXO, and that's challenging potentially because to transfer it, you have to pay on-chain fees. Yeah. The other is an inscription either to a specific UTXO or somehow like anchoring it into the Bitcoin blockchain. I don't know if inscription is the only way to do that. Maybe it's some sort of like taproot signature or something, which also seems more promising, but that's probably at the limits of my understanding. Which one were you thinking of? Like,
I think more the latter, but I don't know enough about it to really suggest what the trade-offs are here.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say if there's someone listening on here that has a better sense of how this could work, it has always made sense to me that somehow, you know, Bitcoin will be used as global storage for really important things.
Yeah.
And so, you know, people like Peter Todd's open timestamps are using it for ordering things. Yeah. It makes sense that a namespace would go in there, but I'm not exactly sure the technicals of how that would work.
Right. And I don't know, on the former suggestion you made where there's like a DK specific or a max specific, I don't know, like, you know, is there every string of characters? Presumably not. So.
No, but there's a lot.
Okay, but like if you come up with a new word, can you just find one reliably? Or?
Yeah, and that's actually what Danny's, I don't know how reliably, I mean, it would be good to get Danny back on here, but he has this thing, the Sat Hunter, which is like it's like a thriving business right now, which is to go and hunt for very specific ordinals. And so that might be, you say, as an example, I want to find, you know, the first ordinal from a Satoshi block, find it.
Yeah.
Or it might be, here's the naming convention, I want DK.
Yeah. Or
whatever the limits are there. So that's definitely doable. They're doing it right now, and it's like, it's a booming business, which is crazy to me, but.
And he said on the Second News thread, he said that they have software and they work with private clients where you can, I think, deposit, this is not financial advice, but you can deposit Bitcoin with them, and then they trade it through exchanges to use that Bitcoin to surface a bunch of UTXOs that they can then send through their sieve or whatever they call the mechanism.
Yeah.
The sluice, if it's like gold mining.
I think of exactly, it's like a little sifter. They call it the rare Sat Hunter or something. It's been crazy for me to watch that again as someone that's not deep in that movement.
Yeah.
But I can say that people are spending like real money on that, which it's wild. But.
And I've been trying to, so I'm not a collector of anything. Like I just
gadgets.
Well, I wouldn't even say I get gadgets when I think they will provide utility.
Fair enough.
And I'm actually, I'd say otherwise, kind of a late or non-adopter of a lot of stuff. So I did get into the camera and mic thing when I was trying to, you know, set up these kind of things. Like I'll experiment with these. But I'd say like I don't really, like I get that people in Magic the Gathering or, you know, fancy watches or whatever, cars, like different people get into different things. I've just never, like I'm missing that gene or something, I don't know.
Yeah, me too. I mean, as a kid, for a little while I had stamps, but I was more into it because I like the crazy ones. Like I had these like gold foil ones from Bhutan.
Oh yeah.
And as like a 6-year-old, I'm like, what's Bhutan?
Right.
That was cool.
Right.
But, and like just like weird like monster drawings or stuff. But besides that, I also am just, I mean, I like for almost 10 years just lived out of a carry-on suitcase. So I don't have that gene.
But so I guess we're
books.
Similar
I guess
in that,
I have books, but
maybe we're similar in that respect. So I think that's why when like, you know, NFTs were all the craze and like ordinals, inscriptions, and you know NFTs on Bitcoin, it sort of I think I was initially kind of just like, okay, fine. People want to do that.
Yeah.
No problem.
Exactly.
But I think I'm like more intrigued now for a couple reasons. One is, if it can get us toward a decentralized namespace so that I can just tell somebody my Nostr name is DK or something and they can find me or make a Lightning or Bitcoin payment to me just by knowing DK.
It's huge.
And nobody controls that, right? Like, so far every system like that has somebody in control. DNS is maybe the best example of a somewhat decentralized, but it's not super decentralized. But I like the idea of just like cryptography and names.
I love it.
So I'd say I have a kind of I'm more intrigued by that space because of what it can be for naming.
Yeah.
But I certainly wouldn't consider myself an expert. And then it got me thinking about, I started looking at these, what are these, is it Magic Eden? Have you played with Magic Eden?
Like a long time ago.
So it's I'd say it's probably the main place that people go today to find
ordinals
rare
and
sets and ordinals. They've got like a lot of that stuff marketed on the front page anyway. And I was trying to think about like, what do I think would be interesting? So like NFTs, Bored Apes or, whatever there's all kinds of different, people are like, oh, well, this is the Prada of NFTs. I'm like, okay, maybe it is.
You're just speaking to the wrong audience here. Like.
But I think the one flavor that I kind of get is the first UTXO of any given block as being like the date stamp, like maybe maybe it's your birthday or your wedding anniversary, your kid was born or something.
Yeah.
To me, that feels like an example of an NFT-like thing that has like a lot of other context around it. It's not just, oh, I like the picture, right click save, all that stuff,
Yeah.
It kind of has like broader social consensus established for like very different reasons than that. And it got me thinking about like, what would the Prada or the Soho house look like? and I think the reason that I don't think none of the stuff I've seen so far really feels like it has that right aesthetics because you can buy in. And almost any place that actually has that kind of social consensus is like, you can't just buy your way in. There's some other characteristic about you, your achievements, your talents, something that makes you selected as a participant in there. And then the special stuff comes from it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think you're right. But I'm probably not the right person because like even those things, like honestly, I'm increasingly of the opinion that like basically everything is a scam, like and like I don't know, like was it Mark Twain or whatever, like any club that would have me, I don't want to be a member of, or was that Groucho Marx? I don't know, somebody. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like honestly, like I'm sure there's a market for it. Yeah. Am I interested in the Soho House? No. Right. Are there people? Yes. Yeah. And I'm sure there's some way to like accrue. I mean, the thing I'm interested in comes way back more to this web of trust. Yeah. Right? Like what I'm way more interested in is like in that list I saw, like the fact that I saw 3 people that I instantly recognize as gigabrains that I think are under the radar, and I take pride on like finding, okay,
being
this is a
cool hunter.
Yes, I do. Like this is a great undiscovered mine. Like I remember, as an example, early on when I was doing early Lightning investments, I was thinking about this today. There are a couple of people where I remember like, we became friends and I was just like, holy shit, you're so smart, way before they blew up. Casey, the ordinals guy. It's ironic because I don't even think he's that into ordinals or inscriptions. Like he's not a collector either.
But he's not. He invented the whole system, but isn't really a participant. I
mean, he made the first one or whatever, but like he hasn't done anything since then. He's doing some like sub print of them, and maybe he'll have like one big payday off of that. But like, Casey, what I really respect and admire so much about him is like he is truly an ideas from the edge thinker and executor. Like he's almost like just like an agent of chaos. He's just kind of like out there like trying shit, and like he's like actually brilliant. And yeah, so I remember, when I first met Casey, I was like, who the hell is this anarcho cat bus guy on Twitter? He has like 400 followers or something. But I talked to him like, oh my God, this guy's a genius. And of course, a few years later, boom, he blows up, and now he's the Ord Father. Same thing.
The Ord Father.
I don't know him. Yeah, exactly. People call that nearly as well. But I have a tremendous amount of respect for Callie, the guy behind Cashew. He was also really instrumental in LM Bits, a company I've been involved with. And I remember when I first saw him, I just like read like, 20 of his tweets. I'm like, this is clearly one of the best developers in the whole space. Like whatever, 200 followers or something. Now he's blown up. He's the Cashew guy. So I am much more interested in finding through Web of Trust, like who are great minds with interesting ideas or creative outputs. I don't know if Ordinals will help me with that. Like the Web of Trust could though.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's what gets me going is like finding the undiscovered.
Totally.
The people and the people who bring the ideas that are not mainstream and that cozying up the establishment like makes me puke. Just like,
no. And there's a lot of that. There's plenty of that.
It's most of the world, I guess.
And it's a skill, and I get it, and I get why it works.
It's a easy path in some ways, but just but the stuff that's like way unknown, undiscovered, but that can actually blow up and change the world. That's the stuff that.
That stuff, and something I'm really coming to terms with is that. I talked a lot about this with Stu. I don't know if you would have called this, if it's beauty or elegance. Like, I love finding and thinking in creative acts and doing just like beauty. And I think we talked about this as taste, whatever. What it really comes down to is like giving a shit. People who truly give a shit because of the thing they're doing, not for any of the accolades, not for any of the clubs you get in, but just like, I'm just gonna make this thing, and like it's almost that kind of like. I almost joke like I like investing in the artists and the autists. It's almost like both the artistic taste and the autistic obsession over just making it right, because not because just because it has to be right for you to see it. Those are the people that I love.
I think I wonder if like people live on a spectrum of that, or like how close to that pure thing people like. Do they start there? Do they figure out how to be there? So I agree what you're talking about is that's like both the people that I find interesting to spend time with and I say I aspire to it but don't feel like I always have it. You know what I mean?
I think you have quite a lot of it, DK. Your podcasts are a great example.
but what I mean is like when I have a moment of more kind of pure clarity of like what I'm doing, it's so much more, I guess I'd call it like peaceful. I feel like at peace when like going on this walk, talking to you, hanging out, it's like I feel at peace. We're
having fun. In nature.
And I think there's some stuff where I sit down and I have like an idea and I write something and I'm like, I'm like writing something to promote an idea. But it's not necessarily to think the idea. And recently I've not been publishing that much. I've been writing a lot and not sharing it yet. I've got maybe 10 things queued up.
Oh, I can't wait to read them.
but
by the way, I think your blog posts are great examples of this like pure thought stuff. So
thank you.
I'm excited to read them.
But I think the deeper I get into just like writing because I want to think about a topic, not because I have something to say to other people about it, but because I want to kind of think about it myself. It's like a very different approach to creating something, and especially, I guess it works for writing anyway.
Well, I might argue, and I don't know if this is the truth, so maybe we can try this in real time, but like, I would argue that maybe everyone, most people, are like born with that, and then society kind of like hammers it out of us. So like if
which aspect hammers the
I mean,
purity out of it?
Yeah, like if you look at kids, like 3 or 4 year olds, like they don't care about the accolade. They don't care about anything. Like they're just like they're doing the thing. If they're playing soccer, they're fully absorbed in soccer. If they're making art, maybe it's like looks like shit. They don't care. Like they're having fun. Like they're just super into that. And maybe that's not the perfect example either, because it's not like maybe there is like some, and what we're talking about also external voice, a little bit of like, I want this thing to be beautiful, which is different than just having fun. And maybe both of those are interesting and beautiful in their own ways.
Yeah.
But I do think that certainly if you are not either extremely lucky or extremely careful, you know, other people's voices, whether that's like other humans or like past humans, like sort of like conditioning that's built up over centuries or millennia in society, that can quickly kind of like stamp out your own like internal curiosity or drive.
Yeah.
And like I would argue, like I've thought about this, like I don't have kids now and who knows if I will, but like I would be terrified to send my kid to school.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrified. Like, you know, I was very, very fortunate that my parents, you know, were not super well off or anything, but they always prioritized, they sent me to really nice schools. And I think that's better than certainly, you know, most of the schooling in the US. But even there, there's like this kind of like, you know, this drive of like, oh man, you gotta like, you know, do really well in your SAT and and that's not all bad either. Like, like some, you know, there's good you can take from other people's thinking for sure. And like discipline in certain cases is very valuable. But yeah, I would be terrified. Like, you know, if you send your kid to a school where they just kind of get like, you know, put in a prison daycare, that's awful. If you get them sent somewhere where there's like, I have a lot of people in my life that went to, you know, really nice schools in New York or here in the Bay Area, man, that sounds like hell on earth. So I don't know.
It's like I mean, I guess a lot of schooling is designed around this kind of industrialist notion of like, here's the way a factory is set up, and here's the manager, and here's the worker bee, the line person, and
do this.
do this, and you have to just like, you're in fierce competition to just execute the thing you're supposed to do.
Totally.
And there's somebody else right next to you doing exactly the same thing.
Totally.
And I think a lot of schooling is designed for that, and then I think a lot of the other stuff around, you know, post-school professional stuff is again a lot of times this like, you know, circus of achievement. You know, there's a ladder, let's climb it. You know, there's always something set up for you.
Right.
And yeah, I would guess that like the best education is the thing that helps somebody, you know, explore what they're curious about, what they're interested in, but then also to like create in the direction that they care about. And not, I think the hard thing is, how do you get, you know, are you doing it for an A+? Are you doing it for a trip to get ice cream? Or, you know what I mean? Like there's little
intrinsic or extrinsic motivation. Yeah, and I think like, you know, like there's a, you know, one of the people I really admire is Mr. Fuller. He has the quote, he's like honestly like something to the to the gist of like society would be a lot better off if we just kind of told kids to get back to what they were doing before we told them what to do. It's probably true. Now, I say all of that also from the other sort of side of understanding this is somewhat of a luxury belief too, in that, you know, it's easy to like think these things forever when you have like rent paid and like food on the table. And like, to be clear, I also don't take away from like, you know, I know, you know, there are a lot of artists who have amazing lives and figure out how to make it work. There are others that, you know, maybe it really is like a struggle, like putting food on the table, and like that life doesn't sound necessarily perfect either. And, you know, people that are better at kind of playing the, sadly, whatever you want to call it, political or social games, like, I mean, there is value in that. There is, you know, so I don't know like if there's like one size fits all. I just know it doesn't sound easy to like direct people this way.
I agree. And I don't mean to suggest that this is easy, but it's almost like, to me, it seems like as you know, technology continues to progress as it is, and you know, AI and most of human just, you know, work is probably, you could say, empowered. You know, humans become much more empowered. So what's the greatest empowered human going to do? Is almost like everybody becomes a storyteller in some sense.
Exactly.
And that's, I don't see that as a bad thing, or humans getting replaced. It's just like humans doing more of the thing that they're good at.
Totally.
But in that world, you really don't want to be programmed for the machine.
Not at all.
And I feel like, you know, maybe the world I grew up in, it was more like, you know, get good grades and do the thing, and you know, it was, that was sort of more. There weren't really so many divergent options. Whereas, you know, starting today, but even 5 years from now, think of how many divergent options there are going to be for what kind of life do you want to craft for yourself.
That reminds me, Stu told me an interesting fact, not on our podcast, but just when we were walking, which it also reminds me, walking podcast, this is great. Because you can definitely feel different, different sections of your brain light up, whatever. But he made a great...
the wind noise doesn't get in the way.
Nah, whatever. It's super worth it. We got to see the ocean. Worth it. But he made a great point to me that I haven't verified this, but I'm web of trusting Stu here. That the root of the word authority is author. And that the person that has the quote unquote authority is the person that authors the story.
Right.
So, and that's, the Steve Jobs quote, the storyteller is the most powerful person. Totally true. And so what happens in a world where everyone's an author, everyone has authority? Maybe we're about to see it. I don't know.
I would guess we are going to see that. And I think like the interesting thing is as it's happening, it's also like what do you have authority over may be evolving too. Like, historically, the only way to get any authority was to have people who, do what you say. You author the story, they execute the characters or whatever, right? That was kind of. I mean, in some portion of history, we didn't really have a lot of machines and stuff like that. But now that we've got these great machines, we can turn everybody into an author, and then the machines just execute all the details.
Would you look 5 or 10 years out, like paint maybe like a best guess vision of what has stayed the same and what's different?
Oh, geez.
Yeah, not to put you on the spot with a super easy question.
Yeah, 5, 10 years out, what's
the same and what's radically different about just like the day-to-day human experience?
I mean, 10 years is a long time with the pace of things going on today.
Yeah.
I think maybe like what would stay the same is somewhat easier. Like I think you'll still need food and oxygen. You'd want clean air.
You want to have intravenous drip.
I think the nature of like friendships and relationships could change a lot, even just in 10 years.
How so?
I mean, this phenomenon of like, virtual girlfriend and I mean, like I think it sounds like super fringe and weird today. It's an idea from the edge.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, so Match.com also felt
weird,
like super weird, and it was only done by like real losers who were on the internet in the 90s. Whereas like today it's kind of like
it's the norm.
Everybody meets online.
Right.
And I think like the whole, like what part of how humans connect with other humans is like, going to maintain, and what part is going to be serviced by other AI type beings.
I sense some predictions in there. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think I could see I think like hanging out, like this walk we took.
Yeah.
I think that'll still be good in 10 years. It'll still be kind of like this.
All right, we'll have to check back in 2034.
We'll check back in 10 years. This is like the Long Now Foundation.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this is always going to be good.
Yeah. Walking with your friends is like a constant.
Yeah, walking with your friends is probably also good in 10 years. Though, like, when I told another friend that I was going to do a walking podcast today, and he sent me he said, oh, it'd be cool if you could, use something like this. And he sent me like a drone.
Ooh.
And he was like, what if the drone could just like capture all your video footage? So here I am carrying this.
Yeah, if you want me to,
no,
over
it. But I thought it'd be fun to try this out and see how it works. I've never really done this.
But the drone would be a nice
addition. The drone would be awesome, right? Yeah. And it could get like overhead, and we could have 5 drones. They could do all
different angles.
Shots.
Yeah.
So I think you and me hanging out, talking. I don't think it's going to be replaced by like a bot.
Yeah.
But like it's just that, there's aspects of how we communicate and what we communicate about. Maybe we could have real-time lookups of like the primal onboarding experience that we were kind of struggling with. Oh, did it go like this or did it go like that?
And our contact lenses, like.
yeah. Maybe it'll be projected there, or maybe we'll have a voice in our ears. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways that could go, but yeah, probably a walk and talk with a friend, I think is just as good, if not even more important and better 10 years from now.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, 21 million Bitcoin, I don't think that's changing.
That's a good constant.
That's a great constant. Yeah, I guess maybe that constancy is even more important when everything else changes. I think a lot of stuff people take as true is just, a period in history. So, what is, I mean, I wrote this piece, Tools for Saving, the other day because a friend was asking me about Bitcoin stuff. And
this is one you published.
Yeah,
it was good.
Yeah. But I think that gets to the point of like, I don't know, like, look, there's all these beautiful, I mean, every one of these houses we're walking by is, what is this, $10-15 million? I mean,
at least, yeah.
And like, is that how people are going to store value in the future?
No, definitely not.
I mean, it seems like it's subject to property tax, and you get some crazy in the city hall who wants to, raise funds for some new crazy initiative. Like, you just got to play ball because you're stuck there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, I think those kinds of assumptions, which are baked into society, I think are, definitely can evolve in a 10-year type time frame.
I love all of that. I think I generally agree that like the one thing that's like constant is like people always like to like feel wanted and enjoy hanging out with people they also like, and like that seems like probably as long as humans are around a thing.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I have no idea. But actually, I kind of want to transition a bit to two things here, and in general, some of it is kind of like when and how, you're a very interesting view on this. I am to a lesser degree, I'd say you to a more degree, of kind of like straddling two worlds. You're in this like Bitcoin, Nostr, freedom tech world, and you're also like friends with a lot of mainstream tech people, right?
Yeah.
And sadly, to date, and something else I want to talk to you more about is like, hopefully we can change that in San Francisco, because it's almost just like offensive to me that like SF got so crypto distracted and all this crap, and now AI is cool, but like whatever. There's not a whole lot of focus on freedom, but there's some with the Yak people. But I'm curious on when and how these worlds will finally merge, when and how SF finally gets into the Bitcoin Nostr land. One entry point for that discussion is I saw on Twitter or something, and it's almost crazy to me because these people are so smart. They seem to be missing the obvious. I think it was Salud, Nat Freeman, the GitHub guy or whatever, is doing a lot of AI investing, who was tweeting out, or someone was tweeting this with him, like, oh man, like, I forgot the gist of it, but it was something like the like housing theory of everything. Like basically all that like is destroying society around us is just housing is too expensive. Yeah. Like the rent is too damn high. And they shared some article and people were talking about Georgianism and all this stuff, and like maybe, but it's like, it's almost shocking me. It's like, how's everyone missing? Like, dude, like housing has got so high because we printed a whole bunch of money, and the only place you can store that shit is property.
Right.
I guess because people are so in like the Keynesian world, like the idea that like, no, like a gold standard, Bitcoin standard is actually like, that solves the problem, demonetizes houses, means that instead of using this as a store of value or using Fang as a store of value, you just pay the actual living value or the, income stream values. And then you have the store value, which is the good money. But like, obviously that idea is still way too far to the edge for most of mainstream tech. When and how do you think that these worlds finally start to collide, or do they not? Or do we just build up our own sort of parallel society, and maybe eventually in 20 years or whatever they finally get it?
Yeah.
Or maybe they do get it. I don't know.
I kind of feel like these things are gonna grow in their own ways for quite a while. I don't think there's any reason to like, force, AI ideals on Bitcoin or vice versa.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's just like, they're each very different, very powerful movements.
Yeah.
And I think if you sort of try to push them together, I think it's fine if people want to experiment. I'm a fan of the experimentation, but if you're like, no, you can't do it unless you do them both.
Right.
It feels like you just end up slowing down and kind of getting left behind.
Yeah.
So I think like, mainstream tech, I'd say, is still mostly the phenomenon is like, centralized companies that have, a database and a customer, and they, sell them software or whatever.
And a lot of GPUs.
And I don't think that's just gonna end all of a sudden. just because like Bitcoin exists. But I do think like the whole concept of how capital gets allocated is I think going to undergo like a big shift. And we might be at this like, all these venture firms have grown up and gotten really big, but the opportunity set is also quite large.
Right.
And it may be that it's hard to go after the really big opportunities without some of the kind of, let's say, irrationality that unsound money permits.
Yeah.
So like,
interesting.
Like part of the way you move the world forward is you like do a bunch of crazy shit.
Fake it till you make it.
Most of which doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And out of that kind of, melting pot of craziness comes. By the way, how's your timing? Are you?
Yeah,
okay?
I'm flexible. Yeah.
So out of that melting pot of craziness, we can go up this and out there. Yeah.
Okay.
Out of that melting pot of craziness comes something good, and it's rare. It's exceedingly rare that anything really useful comes out, but when it does,
it's
boy,
huge.
It is profound, right?
Right.
And so, I don't know that same thing works the same way on a gold standard.
So do you think then? I thought about this a little bit. I have a slightly different take, but I'm curious in this. Like, do you think like the world of outliers and venture capital only can work if you can just keep putting more money and say fuck it, like experiment?
I wouldn't actually make that claim because it like money is always just an accounting system, right?
Right.
And like people can make things and you can account for them in different ways. But these worlds, like unifying these worlds right away, feels like it kind of makes a bunch of awkward trade-offs that neither world really benefits from. So if you had much clearer understanding of value and you had a world where value could not just be confiscated by money printing, I think you would have a bunch of actors line up and make very different decisions, but ultimately like new technologies would get built, people would want to create new things that make them better and enrich themselves while doing
process.
so. Yeah. Which I think is totally fine. It's just kind of like a process, but I don't think you can do that. You can't bolt the old system into the new or the new system into the old. So I think they kind of have to like grow on their own. And there's just like tons of opportunity in all directions, I'd say.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. My guess, so I think venture will still definitely work. I think maybe the bar for investing will go up because like in the same way that it's like more difficult for everyone to raise funds and startups when interest rates are high versus low. So maybe it does slow down some of like the super wild half-court shot, which which hey, I mean, like if it works, it's rare, but it's big. But at the same time, I think there's always going to be a market for smart, creative people trying crazy things. And I think that if you look, I mean, Bitcoin, to quote Sailor, not that there's all of his views, but like I think he's right. There is no top, right? Like it's like GDP coin will go up forever. Maybe eventually with GDP growth, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever.
GDP coin. I hadn't heard that, but I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, that's
my kind of assumption.
I think that's my coining. I think his point is just no top. But the point there though is that in between here and now, I mean, we still have to kind of like fully monetize the existing economy, and so that'll take a while. But eventually, you can't just like sit on your coins and get 100x return. We probably still have that left.
Yeah.
But eventually that goes away, and then obviously you start allocating capital towards other things. But I also think there's another kind of like weird wrinkle to be thrown in this, which I'm already starting to see a little bit personally, which is, in many ways, Bitcoin is just a shift in, it's a wealth transfer. And, you think about it, it's like, obviously there's lots of companies and, individuals who've gotten involved in the last several years, and everyone should do quite well. But the reality is the people that really are gonna get like fucking crazy rich off of this, they were all in like 2011, 2012. And those individuals, to be in that early and be in a meaningful way, probably a little bonkers. Like this was basically like all of the like Ron Paul campaign aides. Seriously, one of my hotter takes is that the highest expected value job of the last 15 years was being on the Ron Paul campaign. I say that like almost factually,
Wow.
in fact.
Hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, and so all these people were like way at the edge, the edge of the edge of the edge. And these people are about, if they're not already billionaires, are about to become like multi-billionaires. Right. So what happens when these fucking like kind of bonkers people are like literally the new, Carnegies and Rockefellers on steroids? That could be really weird because why? Like, well, maybe they're gonna fund some crazy like biotech advances or like, I could see a world where they're actually willing to take way wilder risks than like, I don't know, Sequoia or something is today.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also though, I think capital allocation is just going to change a lot. Like, if there's 21 million or 21 quadrillion sats, is it or something? There's like
whatever it is,
21 million chips, and they need to account for all of the world's wealth.
Right.
Like, who, which ones, which projects deserve more, or which ones can you invest in to hopefully get more of that 21 million? Like, I think that idea still makes sense. So the idea of investing won't stop.
Right.
But who chooses to invest and what kinds of returns they need or expect, I think are certainly going to change a lot from, just how close you sit to the existing, power structures and the money printers and stuff like that.
Or how, again, I agree with that. But again, I think the people that got in and held since 2011, they may or may not be close to the money printer. Some of them are. Some of them are just kind of wackos. Like, I'm sure, did you read this? I think Siggy put this on Stacker News, like a really interesting detail of the life of that. I don't know his last name, Victor Pompescu or whatever, the Romanian dude.
Oh, okay. I don't think I saw it.
That dude is wild. So he apparently died in Costa Rica a couple of years ago. Okay.
This is an early Bitcoiner?
Yeah, I think he was said to have like 5% of the supply, like as much or more than Satoshi. So he would certainly be one of the wealthiest people on the planet. And you read his, well, I'm not saying it's all a good thing. Like some of his stuff is like too edge for me. And that guy's allocating somewhere between 1 and 5% of the world's wealth. Like, buckle up.
Right. I mean, I also think, well, I don't know how it's going to play out. I think it's going to be very different. But there, having a lot of value doesn't necessarily mean that you can allocate it well.
Yeah, you might lose it all within a generation or two.
Yeah, and even how does society create structures to let people's wills be embodied? They want something to happen. Can they get it to happen? Because a lot of times getting people to work together to accomplish something is
super
challenging. Skill.
Yeah.
It's a very challenging skill. It's not just, hiring some, management expert or something. You have to actually kind of get people to gel and vibe and be in it for the, enough of the same reason that you have a shared mission and cause. And those kinds of things you can't just airdrop a bunch of money into a situation and cause greatness. You
totally.
And actually, I think
it might hurt it.
Yeah, I think most of the examples of people trying to do this are in the nonprofit world, and I think it mostly isn't super effective, getting the outcomes desired, because it's a little bit hands-off and not super subject to market forces. So I think it can be challenging to just take money and assume money plus airdrop equals progress or something.
And actually, I think it was our mutual author we both like, Kevin Kelly, who basically, I think he literally was like, no, it's quite the opposite. Like having, maybe no money is the wrong answer too, but having too much, when you're forced to figure something out creatively, that's when you're forced to tap into your friends and try shit and we're sleeping on floors because that's the way we have to do it, and that's what they're, it's why I'm always really skeptical with a lot of repeat founders that raise huge rounds. It's how hungry is this person really? How resourceful? They can just fund this thing indefinitely. And not always. There's certainly there's exceptions on every rule for sure there, but I'm much more interested in like the 21-year-old that has 100K with his friends, and it's not no money. It's enough they can do something, but they have to be way more creative, and I'm generally much more bullish on that situation.
Yeah, constraint breeds creativity, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a good line. But yeah, I think there's the whole like how does capital allocation change? And actually, I'm working on a writing piece that I haven't published yet. But like I said, I've been using writing as a way to sort of noodle on an idea. And I'm working on a piece, it's called Sailor's Gambit.
Okay.
And I'm basically trying to figure out like what the heck is going on here? Like what does he really have in mind? And I wonder, before I say much, like what do you think is going on there?
In what sense? Like his personal motivation, like his strategy, both?
Sure, any of that, or like look at MicroStrategy, right? It's like, I think, I haven't looked at the numbers closely recently, but like, I think they own
1%.
They just crossed 1% of the supply, but I think it's valued at, I don't know, 2 or 3 times 1% of the supply.
Mm-hmm.
So where does that extra value come from? What you have to believe something about the future to attribute that additional value. So what's
going on?
What's going on? Yeah.
So there are some Twitter accounts that like are going way more in depth in this. I'm certainly no expert. I have a couple of theories, but like there's way better people to explain this, I'm sure, than me. One of them is, there are a class of people, myself included, for whom MicroStrategy is your only option if you have an IRA or a Roth IRA and you want Bitcoin exposure, like real Bitcoin exposure, basically anyone on Vanguard.
Because they don't support any of the
ETFs. Exactly.
Okay.
So I, have some. I don't have like a huge IRA or anything, but like, had a little bit in there and like would rather have Bitcoin exposure than not. Yeah. That's one way to do it. So that's one way. 2, it's Bitcoin with leverage. I think he's been clear. I don't know. I'm sure, it's a public company. I'm sure this is all in the financials, but they definitely have some leverage. Yeah. I don't think it's a lot. And it's certainly not 2 to 3x, but it's some.
But like I agree with that. But also like, couldn't other vehicles create levered ETFs? Isn't that like a thing?
I don't know. I don't know like what the regulations are. What I kind of like presume the kind of like left side of the curve explanation here is, he has this vehicle.
Is the mid-meme when we say the left side?
Yeah, exactly. This is the caveman, which is probably right. Yeah. Like he, he has a strong conviction. He knows how to access certain types of capital. Again, not my expertise, but I assume some of these guys, he's getting the convertible debt or the bonds or like whatever they're called from. Yeah. Like that's the only thing they can invest. Like they don't have the option of buying equities or Bitcoin directly. Right. Yeah. I don't know what those funds are, but that's my general sense. Yeah. And so if they have to allocate capital in a certain format and they want to be able to, get some kind of, I don't know if he's issuing warrants with it or whatever, but like some exposure to what he's doing, that's the only way they can do it because of their regulation. Yeah. Then he's basically taking some low interest rate loan, betting that the price of Bitcoin is going to go up over time. But here's the difference between him and the ETFs and why I personally feel more comfortable with MicroStrategy, even as a levered bet. He has cash flow. It's not a ton of cash flow. It's certainly not like what it's valued at, but I don't know, it's like $50 million a year, whatever it is, enough to make the interest payments on a lot of his loans, I'm guessing. Right. And so as long as he has, he's got this kind of like business, which is not that whatever valuable, but it's something, and it's enough that, as long as it can make the interest payments on the convertible debt or whatever he's taking out, and you buy the Bitcoin goes up over time, then it's a no-brainer. Now the question I have is, and maybe it's just because he's like, the sole owner or whatever, sole control, and other companies aren't, why aren't other people doing this yet? Like he's literally got this beautiful arb. It's like, I'm sure there are other people that understand Bitcoin, understand corporate finance. Like, why are other companies not doing this? I'm guessing it's a control thing. Like, no one else has like the balls or the, he obviously doesn't care about quote unquote job security or whatever.
Yeah.
What do you think? What's your take?
Yeah, I think there's truth. As I've been trying to dig into this idea, I think there's truth to everything you've said. Certain types of capital that can't access anything but that if they want Bitcoin exposure. He does have, cheap access and stuff. to me, that doesn't seem itself super durable.
Yeah.
Because I don't know all how regulatory stuff works, but I almost feel like it's possibly really good for Bitcoin to have somebody in this situation because he owns 1% of it, and my guess is, I don't know if the time frame is 6 months or 5 years, but kind of probably has to bob and weave and build something more operationally contributing to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like, you know, the ETFs, you actually have claim on the underlying asset.
Right.
And in MicroStrategy, you don't have any claim on it, right? Like, it's just an opco, you can kind of do whatever you want. You can use your Bitcoin to invest in gold if you want, right? I don't know.
Well, he was definitely, you know, they had like a lightning day, you know, maybe a year or two ago, and he was talking about some business models there. They were exploring, I don't know how far along they are there, or if they're going to do it. One of these Twitter accounts I was referencing, though, basically their argument is that his strategy is just corner the market on Bitcoin and then like lend it out to people over time.
So just use Bitcoin as collateral.
Yeah.
And be effectively function as some sort of a financial service company.
Correct. Like there's going to be a lot, like imagine for a minute Bitcoin takes off like we all think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be anyone that runs a node needs Bitcoin for liquidity.
Yeah.
As one example.
Yeah. And that's just going to generate some yield that will go into shareholders.
Yeah.
5% dividend or something.
Maybe there's more like, I'm sure I'm just giving the super simplified version, but like high level, Bitcoin will be used as working capital. Yeah. He owns the Bitcoin. If you need it, he's the lender.
Well, I like the fact that he owns so much, but not enough.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of this beautiful in-between. Like the whole company's totally dependent on it, but Bitcoin's not dependent on him.
Right. It's great.
Right, which is kind of like, I think the role that a lot of like crypto projects are like, oh, we've got a founder who can raise capital, who can move fast and bring a technology idea to life.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like those are typically considered good properties. Those are desirable things.
Yeah.
And if only you could get past the fact that it messes the neutrality up so bad that you kind of know the thing will never work.
Yeah.
You know, you can't make that work long term.
And then you end up with Vitalik and Joe Lubin or whatever, like who collectively own half of Ethereum or something crazy. It's like wild.
I think they started with 70%, and I don't know if they've sold over time and what they're down to.
That's crazy, but
yeah, you kind of have the opposite here. Mm-hmm. We just bought it on the open market, and he's
in the public eye.
He's amassed, 1%, but he's probably never going to get to 5%. I think 2% would be hard.
Yeah.
So he's pot committed. But Bitcoin, MicroStrategy can fail, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Like, so Bitcoin doesn't need him, but he needs Bitcoin now.
Totally.
And I wonder how many more situations like that can come up.
Well, I think, so in order to get that much of the supply.
Do you want to hang here for the...
Oh yeah, for the wrap up.
Yeah.
I mean, so first of all, I mean, I think he's done a great service to Bitcoin, and that's awesome. But, he's not really the product guy necessarily.
Yeah.
I think we have, obviously, Jack Dorsey's probably leading the charge there. And I don't know if you saw like BitKey shipped recently, which was pretty cool. Yeah. I got one to play with. It was pretty fun. Like I think my guess is Block or Square will probably end up doing the most for like kind of bringing Bitcoin to a mainstream audience, at least in the next couple of years. So I think that's great. But it's great we have multiple of these guys.
Yeah.
And then again, I go back to my point, like, at this point to acquire that much, the only way you can do it is one, be from the early days, and there are those whales, like this Victor guy. I can imagine if he owned 5x what all MicroStrategy does.
Right. Yeah.
And he's like crazy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And maybe his keys are gone if he actually died. Right? The only really way you could do that today would be, your BlackRock, and then you're holding on behalf of clients, or you're a nation state, and that's going to happen soon. So I do expect to see, like my guess is, you're going to see the ETFs have been a much bigger deal than most people expected. You've got this constant buy. Eventually, the GBTC outflows will end, but this constant buy is only getting bigger over time because they didn't launch with all of their customers having access on day one for a variety of reasons. And I think it's only a matter of time. You've got this constant buy. You're about to have the halving, and there is no question. I mean, I'm sure it's already happened, besides El Salvador. El Salvador obviously is one example, but you know, it's only a matter of time until G20 countries are like, huh,
Right.
we should probably get some of this. And then you get
Right.
one to make a big buy. If like one of these big Middle Eastern countries comes in, they've got, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars. Like, salud. But even then, with hundreds of billions of dollars, how much could they get? You know,
Yeah.
percentage points at most.
That,
And,
to me,
yeah.
that's almost like intrigues me as a potential business for MicroStrategy to be in, because they sort of caused the problem, and it's something to do with like custodianship plus audit, regulatory compliance. Like they're operating that at scale. I wonder if they just build that for themselves, then they make that as a treasury product available to every, you know, U.S. corporation, and then they extend that to every sovereign that needs some sort of custody, you know, strategy.
I think it's a great play for the U.S. My guess is that the individual sovereigns will want to build their own. In the same way that some are looking to build their own like models or compute clusters. Like you saw Bukele, you know, finally publish an address, which is great.
Yeah.
Who knows if he'll run off with it or whatever, I don't know. But he claimed that they held the keys in a bunker on El Salvador soil. And so I actually think that, yeah, smart sovereigns will probably be like, no, like, this is on our soil.
Uh-huh. So meaning they
guard it with
be
guns.
And so you don't think there's like a sovereign wealth business for MicroStrategy to get into?
Maybe. I mean, again, this is not my area of expertise,
Yeah.
but if I were running a sovereign wealth fund, I would want the keys on my soil.
Right, yeah.
I would not be trusting, you know, the Bank of England to hold my gold.
Right. All right, and not like an e-cash. You're not going to run the mint.
You know, I still haven't used that stuff, so I probably should. But
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to get. Are we going to hang with Bob tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll get a much better sense.
Non-pod, but just we'll get a sense to play with it. We can kind of share some of our learnings.
And hopefully we can cook some onto a pod here soon. So.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, this is fun. Our first walking pod.
Let us know what you think. And if y'all, especially, I think we threw out a couple of questions in there. I forgot what they were about. But anyways, if you listened and you had suggestions, let us know.
Yep. Hit us up. All right.
Bye.
See you guys.